So we're going to get started with questions. We want to honor your time and certainly give you time to continue to socialize or ask us one-on-one questions at the end. We wanted to do the group questioning. One thing we forgot to mention earlier is ways to stay in contact with us and what's going on with Outdoor School. There's a few ways you can do that. One, on our website there is some instructions. If you scroll down, it talks about joining our listserv or stakeholder group list. That is a process where you opt in. So we encourage you to do that. That means that any messaging that goes out from us will be on that list. And if there's news, you're going to get it that way. We don't overburden that list. Certainly, we don't. Often listservs, you get emails every day, and then pretty soon you just unsubscribe. So it won't be like that, but it will be a way for you to get information that's pertinent to what's going on. The second way is we do have a Twitter account. So if you're into that sort of technology, certainly follow us, and that is just OR Outdoor School. So at OR Outdoor School. You can follow us that way. We also have a Facebook page. It's the same, OR Outdoor School. We also have an Instagram account, which admittedly is not as busy as those other means, just because we have to be careful about student privacy when we post photos. So some facilities, that's one of the things to think about when you plan for Outdoor School. Some facilities actually in some districts do a waiver for all their students if they sign up for Outdoor School so that they have that covered. Just saying that students can be photographed and maybe used in promotional materials. And then students that opt out of that, they have a way of indicating and knowing who those students are. So often when we visit a facility, that's one of the first questions that we ask, because one of the best ways to tell the Outdoor School story is through photos and talking to students. And so, you saw some in our presentations, but when you put photos of students doing the things that happen at Outdoor School, it's just like, if a parent has been to Outdoor School, it recalls some of their memories, and if a student hasn't been or a parent hasn't been, they get curious. And so we like to take photos, and so when we visit a facility, we always ask, are there any students who can't? They'll tell us who they are, and we'll take their photos. So that's just a couple of ways to stay in the know, but again, as everyone's already said, call us, email us, visit us, invite us to visit you. The answer will always be yes. The condition on that is just when. And we will always make an effort to try to be here, whether it's any one of us, our regional person, or all of us, perhaps. We've been instrumental in working with some districts who've tried to move from, these are some larger districts who've tried to move from a few schools who have participated because they just wanted to, and the district supported that, to large districts saying, okay, that's great, but we're going to go all in now. We're going to go from 3 schools to 45 schools. And so some of those districts have required some support guidance from us as to how they implement that sort of shift in their program. So with that, we'd love to hear your questions, and I think the way we'll tackle these is just on our team, whoever wants to jump out it can, or if that's your area. But also recognize you all in the room have some knowledge, and if you'd like to answer one of the questions, please throw your hand up and we'll give you.
We were talking at the table with Priscilla, who was kind enough to sit with us, about some teachers in the Salem-Keizer and Woodbrook school districts of Title I schools who are still getting into the loop and communicating with their school districts. Are you planning an information session in addition to the one you're doing in Southern Oregon? I know there's one in Marion County, but is there one coming up where teachers, classroom teachers, and administrators can come directly as they could today in that region, somewhere on the I-5 corridor in Western Oregon?
There's nothing on the books right now, but the answer is yes. What I can tell you that's happening in, at least in the Salem-Keizer area, is there's already been several professional development opportunities for their educators. I had the opportunity to attend one about 3 months ago. I know Renee's been there, and there's been 1 or 2. There's one on Monday. So that continues, but I think just a session like this is not on the calendar, but it's certainly going to happen. So our goal is to do this sort of event on a regular basis in every community. So we will keep you posted on dates on that.
And the notion was that we were going to do it with each advisory committee meeting, but I think we need to make it more frequently, at least once a quarter, And so we'll work on that. And before we let you go, would you introduce yourself and tell everybody what organization you're with so that everybody has an understanding?
Sure, thank you. Sorry, my name is Catherine Alexander. I'm the Executive Director for Straub Environmental Center, now called Straub Outdoors. And we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and one of the programs that we do is outdoor school. We have two models. We have a 3-day, 2-night, and we now have just developed curricula for bilingual 3 consecutive non-residential days. And we're happy to report that we have all the learning outcomes that traditionally happens in a 6-day, 5-night, with 3 days. So just no small feat, as you all can imagine.
That's awesome, and you reminded me, thank you for that. So one of the things that you may ask us to do as a resource, particularly if your district doesn't have a lot of resources in terms of translation, is we've already begun the process of translating our materials into the top 6 languages in Oregon. Ultimately, it'd be great if we could do all 153. I think it's actually more than that now, but at least to start, the top 6 languages. And so we know that you may have resources that you need translated related to outdoor school, and if that's something you need guidance or assistance with, that's something we can additionally fund or provide the resource to you. So please reach out to us. It really depends on the ESD that you work through and the size of your district, but we're committed to that. So I think the target group is not necessarily the students per se, but one of the areas that's difficult is if you're trying to reach families and explain what outdoor school is, you don't have someone that speaks the language, and you also don't have materials you can hand a parent that describe what's going to happen. That's a barrier to participation, and so please let us help you do that.
I'm so familiar with the Oregon State Parks Foundation. Before I tell you about the foundation, is it Charissa or Charzy? Which both?
So my name is Charissa, but my nickname is Charzy.
Okay. So you had asked at the end of your presentation what you could do to help people understand equity, diversity, inclusion. And I thought I'd just tell you a story that I thought would be helpful, and it's about getting examples. I mean, I like to think of myself as being open-minded and that sort of thing. There was a session about outdoor school or about outdoor education at the zoo recently, and we had a series of roundtables, and I went to the one on equity, diversity, inclusion. And for me, it was a light bulb moment. People started talking about examples, and the particular example that came up was the idea of pulling invasive species. And somebody said, watch out, depending on the community you're talking to, that might be seen as farm work. That might be a negative. And for me, it was a shock. And so I think, not assuming that people understand what diversity inclusion are, but actually giving some tangible examples that might cause light bulb. So I thought I would just mention, I'm again with the Oregon State Parks Foundation. We're an independent 501c3, and we have been trying to figure out how can we help with this outdoor school situation. After the Great Family Foundation pointed out that despite the funding that has come up, we're so good that there's only enough residential outdoor school capacity in the state for about 50% of the kids to go to a residential program. And most of the capacity is clustered, as I understand it, in the northwest part of the state. So we said, well, gosh, there are a lot of gorgeous state parks. If you draw a swath from northeastern Oregon across central Oregon and southwestern Oregon. And so we said, what's the role for the foundation to come in and try to help facilitate making those state parks available as outdoor school locations? And the parks told us, hey, you're welcome to use our parks for outdoor school with 2 conditions. First condition is they don't want to build buildings. The second is they didn't want to run the program. So we've been going through a process over the last year of trying to find ways to deal with those 2 criteria. And the first criteria was don't build buildings. So we went through a process of saying, let's take a model of the Boy Scouts and see if we can get platform tents and pop-up kitchens. Parks said that that was okay. We tested the concept, got it working for 2 years. It worked. And then the second question was, who can run the programs? And we identified a company called Nature Bridge. in Washington that has been running outdoor schools in 7 national parks for 30 years. So they have the credibility that the state park system was looking for, and they're apparently willing to be the concessionaire. So we're in the process. We've identified now 3 possible locations. Wallowa Lake State Park here in northeastern Oregon, Pineville Reservoir in central Oregon, and Joseph Stewart State Park in southwestern Oregon as pilot locations. But we have kind of a chicken and the egg problem right now, and that is that in order to get concessionaires to come in and go into on these programs, we need to be able to say there's going to be enough demand for you to justify putting the expenses up. So one of the things I was looking for today was to hear from some school districts, how do you make decisions, and how can we help a potential concessionaire know that there's going to be enough demand for them to justify setting it.
Yeah, John Summerfield with Pendleton. Just get in touch with as many agencies as you can in that area. See what their availability is, because they might have 3 or 4 school districts that are already kind of knocking on their door. That's what we're finding locally. We never had trouble booking times and setting up calendars with agencies, and now they're telling us, hey, we have 3 other districts. We'll try to work with you. So it behooves you to get to them as quickly as you can. I suppose that's it's just one of the logistics that's kind of created with so many districts needing field studies and resources. So I hope I've kind of addressed what you're looking for. Right. Yeah. See if the Forest Service has, most of the agencies have it's part of their mission to have outreach, education.
So when you talked about the Forest Service, the water resources to tribes, that's what you're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Susan Beard. I teach in Portland, and we work with OMSI, and they have sites all over the state. And I know that every year their schedule's getting more important as well. So that might be another one to reach out to.
And to add a little bit more to that, so one of the things that we're working on, and again, these things are going to keep rolling out, but is a outer school provider survey that will go out. And so one of the things that we see in our role, or actually it's demanded of us in our role, is to be a resource for coordinating sites. And so what we see in the future, and this is a pretty immediate goal, is to have this list of providers in Oregon along with a little bit about them. So we know that the providers range from, we do everything, drop your students off and pick them up, to you can just rent our facility. So because of that variability, particularly districts that are new, it can be challenging to shop around, get pricing, because often the providers will ask questions that more experienced districts would be able to answer, and new districts would say, well, I don't know, what is that? When do I do that? How do I do that? And so I think a list provided for districts to shop around, even to the point where that might be updated where we say it's full. So if you log in and look at providers, it might say OMSI full, and then you can see the next provider in that area below is this person, this agency. And here's what their accessibility of their camp looks like, and maybe they have bilingual programming. So I think that's going to be something that helps. That's going to be something that takes time. The condition upon that, though, is that in order to be on that list, we have to hear back from those providers. And so we're going to work really hard when that list goes out to make sure that we're getting to all of the providers, that they know we're there, because it would be a shame for someone to go to that site, and if we miss somehow a provider, or if they don't respond, and then they wonder why they're not getting the business, or they're not getting people reaching out to them. So that's going to take a really strong team effort, which is why I mentioned it. So you as a provider may even notice that a provider you're aware of is not on that list, and you reach out to them or to us and say, hey, we're in the area, but there's this other provider that's in the area. I don't see them on the list. So it's kind of like, I don't know that we'll ever get to the point of being, Expedia in terms of outdoor school providers. I don't think we want to be, but I think the best way for us to give information would be just providing it in a really easy to read format on the website where people can contact those folks.
My name is Landon Reddington. I'm with Camp Elkanah outside of LaGrande, Oregon. So kind of along the lines of what you were just talking about, what would be the process of, so we're a provider, what would be the process of getting in touch with those providers? Would you guys like send out a survey questionnaire to us that we would then fill out and mail back to you? And then how would you reach out in the first place to find out about them?
Hi, Landon. We chatted a little before lunch, but I think this is one of our biggest challenges, knowing how busy providers are, especially during outdoor school seasons in fall and spring. And so I really feel like it's going to be a multi-layered effort. So yes, certainly we will email surveys out with information requested, and then some additional survey questions about the accommodations, how long you can accommodate a school, what your availability is, etc. But if we don't hear from you, then we'll reach out by phone. It'll be a phone campaign. And then if we don't hear back from you at that point, then you will probably get a visit from myself or one of us or our regional coordinator, because we feel like this is a top priority, not just for us as a program and providing resources to districts, but as we keep growing as a program and more students participate, camp facilities, outdoor school facilities, and providers are really going to be stretched thin. And so the more complex, in-depth list we have in our provider database, the better we're going to be able to serve students.
And I just wanted to respond on a sort of bare bones. We have a provider list that was generated by Friends of Outdoor School. They did a similar survey, I want to say in 2015. So if you feel that you are on their provider list, and that survey was the base for the provider Tableau interactive data that's on the Brave Family Foundation site. So if you're familiar with those things, you know you're part of that you're probably already on our list. And so you don't need to worry about getting on it. But if you aren't familiar with those or you're uncertain, certainly give us an email. We have that data list. We can add you to it. We'll send out an email. Yes, and please respond to the survey that goes out asking for some additional information, because we are going to add some questions that really get to the type of facility that you have, again, what kind of accommodations you have for students with disabilities, are you ADA compliant, and then those will also, what we're trying to do is collect some data on on providers in terms of whether you have curriculum, whether you provide field studies, and some of the things that I was getting at with our pilot study, our common measures pilot study. So yes, you might already be on our database, that exists, the one from Friends of Outdoor School, but also please respond to the new one we sent out.
And this is not more work. Here's the other benefit to that. It's not just that you're going to be connected with schools better, but also another thing coming up, and I'm trying to qualify everything that I say we're going to do so that you don't expect it by next month. So this is probably an intermediate goal, but certainly something we want to provide is the capacity to bring providers together, both in their regions and even statewide. We talked about a statewide conference because as we visit facilities, here's what we notice. We notice things that are phenomenal that when we talk about them at a different facility, they say, I want that. Tell us how they do that. How do they put that together? And just that connection, because they often, you can't visit other providers because during the season when they're doing those cool things, you're doing your cool things. So that's a challenge. And so a way to bring folks together to share those best practices, it is very, unless someone moves from one provider to another, which happens, and they bring some of that good stuff with them, it is very, very isolated. Like great things are happening and no one knows about them. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is bringing the folks together so that we know how to better support you in your work. So, Sharissa talked about professional development. You're part of the stakeholder group that we want to provide professional development to. So it could be everything from camp management to safety and risk management to how to put in a new water system. I mean, whatever it is for you that you need assistance with, that's going to be very different than what we work on with educators. That's okay. We're trying to make sure that every person in the network, every wheel spoke is taken care of. So that's another reason.
Let's go back to the chicken and the egg question. We'll talk about your data gathering capabilities, because I think in addition to kind of holistic providers, it would also be interesting if you guys could serve as a facilitator for the unmet demand. So if there's a way to pull together, a list of schools or school districts that are looking for a provider resource that don't have it or want to change from a day program to a residential program, that sort of thing, it would help from an entrepreneurial perspective and figure out where to make investments in additional programs or additional camps or upgrading the camp, that sort of thing, rather than having the provider running around, the potential provider running around trying to find out is there enough demand.
We know already there's a lot of demand in the markets that you mentioned, especially in Southern Oregon, especially in Southwest Oregon, being that we don't have very many facilities that are serving schools in that area, and those are areas that we really are working on getting more schools on. So I think we can with the database.
I would also encourage everyone to contact us because last year was our first year, and so people were just getting to know us. But I probably you might have received maybe one or two calls from people saying, usually it was an after the fact thing, saying, well, my costs will change because I waited until too late in the season and I tried to make a reservation and I couldn't get this place, I had to go to this place and they were more expensive. Or I couldn't get, I wanted to do a 5-day, 4-night, and now I can do a 3-day, 2-night because that's all that was available. So we're hearing things after the fact, but certainly encourage everybody that if you're out there looking and you're a little bit frustrated, give us a call, and at least we'll have that information.
So while we wait for another question, that reminded me of something else that we talked about in our advisory committee yesterday, but I want to make sure providers in particular are aware. We know that many providers are either barely making it, so their costs are, they're just like, ooh, we can pay the bills, or they're losing money on outdoor school. They might make that money up through grants, fundraising, summer programs, corporate events, those sorts of things. This is more complicated than what I'm about to say, but we encourage you to move towards a more sustainable cost structure so that you're charging schools what it costs to put on a high quality program. That's easier said than done because we know that there's competition. It's friendly competition, but there's competition. So we've heard from providers, yeah, you're right, but we're afraid if we raise our costs, then we're going to be more expensive than this other place down the road, and the school may choose them. So I think it's a cooperation between providers and schools to recognize that there has to be a sustainability model built into how we do outdoor school programming, and that includes the capital outlay on our facilities. Spirit and I visited Camp Tamarack, and they were saving to make improvements. And they came back from the winter season, and their septic system had just completely disintegrated. So there went all of their savings that they built up over 10 years to make improvements. They were gone. So they're kind of back where they started again, and they're going to start trying to build up their savings to make improvements. And so when you think about things like foundations and roofs and even heating systems and septic systems, those things are very expensive. And if you're not budgeting for those, you're investing in those things, then you're not breaking even, you're losing. And so now that there's state funds, we want to make sure that providers and schools recognize that we have to start to move to a place where we're compensating our staff in a way that's equitable, that we are reinvesting in our facilities, that we start to move away from kind of a get by. Because now that the funding is there, if we keep doing that, the reality is that we're going to have some of these older facilities start to be decommissioned. We cannot now at this point lose capacity. We have to grow it. It's much easier to maintain a facility than it is to start from scratch and build a new one. So think about, again, that's complicated, but I just want you to know that you have our support in that, because one of the fears would be that this program becomes successful and is that we lose capacity because of older facilities, or we find out it's not accessible because we haven't reinvested, and those sorts of things happen. Then it makes our challenge to convince the legislature, which has to decide every 2 years to continue to fund the program. I don't have any reason in my mind why they wouldn't, because it was such a popular voter initiative. It's kind of a mandate saying you better do this. This was not something that barely passed. It passed overwhelmingly. So they have a charge by the public to do this. But we have to make sure that we have the capacity and the quality that needs to take place with this investment. So something to think about, and I think that's another area where we bring providers together to talk about ways that they can be more purposeful around pricing. And we've budgeted in our budget, we expect 5 to 10% increase in costs over the next several years. We've pretty much built that in and said, schools, we know providers are going to be raising their fees. It's built into the budget. We anticipate that. Don't worry about it when they tell you this year is going to be a little more. That I think many of them have been losing money, and that can't sustain. So just want to throw that out there. Feel free to talk to us more about that offline, but that's certainly a commitment.
Chris, I've seen several people taking pictures of the slides. Do you want to talk about this is going to be on the website?
Absolutely. So this listening session, the earlier portion, and then this question and answer will both be posted on our website. Give us a few days, since we'll be traveling to Southern Oregon. Also, the PowerPoint will be posted there as well. So anything that you need, again, whether it be PowerPoint slides, buttons, stickers, these materials, which will be translated into 6 languages, please reach out to our office if you need things like that. We're happy to help you, support you, either give you the digital file or to just mail you 100 of them if you need. That's built into our cost structure, and certainly we're willing to do that. So all we can ever do is say no if we can't do it, but please ask.
Since there's silence, let me take a moment to give a little quick commercial for some free money. Our foundation has a program called Ticket to Ride, which we view as a feeder for outdoor school. We provide up to $500 transportation funding for 3rd and 4th grade classes in Title I schools to go to state parks for the day. And Jen, we're having a challenge giving the money away, getting people to apply for it. So if you know people who are teachers in 3rd and 4th grade classes in Title I schools, please help them. Go to OregonStateParksFoundation.org, and there's a Ticket to Ride button there where they can apply to a very simple application. We want to help get the kids out to the parks.
And the one thing I was going to ask Priscilla, do you feel like we've covered things that we need to cover? Do you have any other things that you feel we should talk to these folks about?
I think this was a great presentation, and thank you for putting it together this 3rd day that you've all been in, 4th day you've all been in Pendleton. My interest in being here was because I'm a retired teacher and I did outdoor school in Eugene. One of those programs where we earned every penny for our Title I students and where to go. Until we got a new administrator who said, gotta work on those benchmarks, gotta work on those test scores, you don't have time to do fundraising anymore, and there went outdoor school. So this is near and dear to my heart. And I grew up in Baker. When it was, my birth certificate says Baker, not Baker City. Thank you very much. So I am especially interested in knowing that it's getting to the whole state. I did not have this opportunity as a kid. Thank you.
We have the room until 2, so feel free to hang out and talk to us. There's still drinks. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.